Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want you fired up about our guest. His name is Gerald Johnston, and we're talking about his book, Biblical Chronology, Deciphered, BC Dates Solved. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Gerald. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Hello, Dr. Angela. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, as is tradition around here, we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves to perhaps those few people that may be unfamiliar with you or your work. With that being said, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What makes you you?
Well, I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm a pilot, a flight instructor. I'm a Christian. I should have started with that. I love God, and I love the Bible, and I love studying the Bible. So, yeah, I think that sums up pretty quickly me. I'm kind of an unknown writer, I guess, but I have a very special book. I'm looking forward to talking about it today.
Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that life presented an opportunity and you said yes?
I would say it's the second thing. It's life presented the opportunity. It was a book. I even said in my book, not every book that needs to be written has a good writer. And I'm a good technical writer, I guess. I'm an engineer, but as far as writing a book, it was a challenge for me. So, but I welcomed the challenge, and I had a lot of people help me with editing, and it turned out really good. So it was a subject I know I needed to share.
Now, the title of your book, Biblical Chronology Deciphered, BC Dates Solved. I like the title. How did you come about it? Did you find that the title came to you first and you were able to write around that? Did the title develop out of the writings? What made you select these words to entitle your book?
That's a very good question. Really, the design of the book, of the cover. When I designed the cover myself, I wanted to have the letters work out like on the cover, where it's BC Dates Solved or BC Solved, and then Biblical Chronology Deciphered, Discerned, or whatever. Deciphered seemed to be the best fit to make the dates go vertical down the front of the book. So, and it explained what I did. So I said, yeah, I think that's a good title.
Now, when you were putting the book together, I know that many authors will put the book in a way that makes it easier for the reader to really glean everything that they need to from the resource. With that being said, is there a best way to read your book? Did you put it in a way where we should read it from cover to cover, literally meaning, page after page? Did you do it more so in sections or chapters where we should really, the goal should be to complete that section or that chapter before moving on to the next? Some folks even like to do maybe like a devotional style where you can read a few pages, 3 or 4 pages maybe, and then be able to put it down before simply moving on within a section. How did you choose to construct your book?
I wrote the book in order. I started, really, I'd like for people to just start at the dedication and read it straight through. It would be good to get at least through chapter 2 before you get to a stopping point. When you get to the chronology itself, it's a 6-page, 11 by 17 chronology, and it could get to be a bit overwhelming if you went in and tried to prove or disprove the chronology. If you tried to scrutinize the work too soon, I think it would take away from the learning process. So I suggest you read chapters 1 through 5, and then the others can almost be read in any order, but it's 6 and 7 kind of go together. You need to read 6 and then 7. And then the chapter on Paran is good to read after the chapter on the Exodus. I think those are chapters 9 and 10, if memory serves me correct.
Now, I have expressed on the show many times that I ask this question, the next question, because I like to gift books, especially at those life stages and phases where, there's a transition from one to the next. Is your book, do you feel, appropriate for a high schooler, for someone that would be graduating from high school? Or would you say perhaps college age and older, simply because there needs to be maybe a better understanding of faith, or they need to have life experience to be able to understand? What is the best age range there?
I would think it's better probably high school and up, yes, maybe even college and up. It's a theoretical result, my book, and you have to understand a little bit of how it's developed. And no, I would think someone 15 years or older would welcome the read and do well with it. It's presented very nicely. It's presented with a lot of images to make the read very easy. As my sister pointed out to me, a lot of people don't like numbers, and this book has a lot of numbers in it because it's what the chronology is. It's gathering the numbers in the Bible to assemble and present a chronology.
Now, what is your book about? And you've, kind of hinted at it there, but I want to give you an opportunity to really tell us. Now, of course, here's my disclaimer that I always give out, and my listeners know he's not going to tell you every little nook and cranny about the book. Why? Because you need to purchase the book to see how it ends, that type of thing. However, I do want for you, if you would please, Gerald, to give us a kind of an overview of what can we expect, or why is it important that we understand certain aspects about your book?
Well, my book is a theoretical chronology, as all chronologies are. When you lay out the biblical timeline, there's one piece of missing information to assemble the timeline of biblical history. And then you need one other source to connect it to a known event in history, to a secular date. So when you assemble it, I like to think in terms of like a wooden yardstick, an old wooden yardstick just floating around in space, and it has to be anchored to some known date. And I anchored it to the fall of Babylon, which we have the Nabonidus and Cyrus cylinders that were discovered in the 1800s that anchors the chronology, and that was never available before in history. So I developed an exact chronology, exact to the year, and it's no other one like it in the history of the world. I spent 12,000 hours studying the Bible. I learned Hebrew and Aramaic. I've read the Bible probably 15 times in English, the whole Bible, and then the Old Testament, I've read it almost 7 times now in Hebrew, and the Aramaic parts 3 to 4 times. So I have a good insight. I present things that have never been told before. There's mysteries that are revealed that have never been revealed in the history of the world, and they're very provable, and they're in the book. And I'd love to give some examples.
Absolutely, and we definitely want you to give some of those examples a little bit later in the show. Thank you so much for volunteering to do that. Now, when it comes to writing, many times authors come up against a particular challenge. It could be writer's block. It could be the storyline is going in a particular direction, and then they find that they need to do a little bit more research or confirm a particular fact so that they can cite it properly. Did you experience any type of challenge while you were putting the book together, as far as the writing process is concerned?
I did. Well, one of the problems is just grammar things and punctuations, capitalizations, just Do you capitalize the personal pronouns that relate to God? Well, some people say yes, some say no, and some of those things were difficult, and I had to just make a decision to go with what I thought was the more standard approach for those things in in the present day. But other things, I wrote a first copy of the book, a first edition, and I wrote it as a color print book, and it was very expensive to print the book, and I was very discouraged when I found out what the printing costs were on the book. But I thought color would help explain the chronology better. Since then, I've revised it. This is a second edition. It's in black and white, and it's going to be a much lower price book so that everybody can get their hands on it. And so those were challenges to explain it with the black and white format versus the color format for the chronology. So, yeah, those are some of the challenges. The other challenges I had is I knew I was writing to an audience that a lot of times have preconceptions. And, preconceptions can close a person's mind to where they won't even listen to what you have to say. I can give examples of how preconceptions work. I worked one summer in a meat packaging plant as an intern engineer, and I was taken inside a shock chiller where the temperatures were minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And this was in northern Mississippi one summer on a job, and it was freezing cold, and I was only in there a couple of seconds. But years later, I was in a conversation with some people from Alaska, and they were talking about how brutally cold minus 10 degrees was. And I said, I know, I was once in minus 40. And they were shocked. They said, well, when and where was that? And I answered their question. And I said, well, it was one summer in northern Mississippi. And you could almost see the preconceptions rising in their minds that, and the disbelief because they didn't have all the facts.
Unfortunately, I think that so many people are operating from a place of disinformation simply because they've never had the proper conversation, just to find out what the facts are. So you're right. I think the same way that most people believe that, if you're from Alaska, that means that you automatically like the cold weather more than you like the warmer weather, or if you're from the south that you like the hot weather as opposed to colder. You're right. There's always some type of preconception that people have against folks, and we should really have more conversation to discover new things about people. I couldn't agree with you more there. Gerald, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, could you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Thank you, Dr. Angela, for that. My book, Biblical Chronology Deciphered, is available at Amazon, and I have a website, johnstonbcd.com, all one word, johnstonbcd.com.
And now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Gerald Johnston, and we're talking about his book, Biblical Chronology Deciphered, BC Dates Solved. Gerald, my next question for you is about the chronology of it all. Why do you suppose that God has put the pattern of time in the Bible the way in which it is presented to us?
Dr. Angela, I believe that God did that because, he shows us things to come, and we can expect to have patterns in the Bible like that. But I think he did it mainly to have a skeleton to the Bible. The text is more like the meat of the body, and the numbers in the Bible are like a skeleton just to help the translators, because you're translating a language and a book that's ancient, and God knew that words could change meaning through years, and so he put numbers in the Bible to help the translator stay on track and to keep them kind of bounded between certain parameters. And I think that is a lot of the reason for it. The other thing is to show timely.
Uh-huh. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I think he just God's way is numbers. A lot of what he does is through numbers.
So true. I was going to say I like that answer in that numbers are always consistent. So that's the one thing that's going to help keep you on track. Yeah, your space saver, if you will. You know that you're there, and you're going to progress to there, and you're going to progress to there. So even if something else gets a little distorted or out of place, that numeration helps you. That is such a good perspective on that. I love it. Now, when you were putting the stories together and, of course, doing your research to make sure that everything was proper and true, what are some of the most revealing discoveries that you found?
I discovered who touched the bones of Elisha and rose from the dead. And that is something that has never been known, never been revealed. And once you find it, like I have, and I presented the book, then there are scriptures that explicitly say it, but you will gloss right over those verses, and people have for millennia. And now that it's clearly revealed who that was, and it's a timely discovery, and it's amazing. And it's in the book.
Now, we don't expect for you to divulge that information here. You gotta buy the book if you want to know what the answer is. So no. I like that. A quick little teaser. I love that. Thank you for that. Now, can you give, speaking of examples, can you give an example of how you believe that chronology helps with Bible studies? We know that we have many apps that are available to us on our phones or our iPads, or however we're choosing to do our Bible studies, and many are topical, where we can choose if we're going through bereavement or anxiety, or we're just trying to find our happy place. Some are even done in a way where it's men's Bible study or a Bible study for women. But there's also one that kind of takes us through the stories from start to finish, date-wise. Why do you feel that it's important for us to have that understanding of how to understand and read the Bible as well?
Well, the chronology helped me discover who touched the bones of Elisha and rose. And it's not a secret. I mean, I don't mind revealing who it is. Joash, the king of the Jews, he resurrected as the king of Israel. And it's in the scripture, and it's never been revealed. I think I just revealed it to the world right then. But it's in the book how I got there. And it's not those chapters are not really an easy read, because it's a lot of references you have to go through to get there. But once you get there and you see, then it's obvious, and it's plain as day that that's who it was. And it's interesting that it's hidden in the Jewish Bible, and it's almost a foretelling of the story of Jesus, the King of the Jews that died and rose from the dead. But it physically happened with King Jehoash. And also another example would be when I looked at this Ezekiel chapter 4, where Ezekiel talks about having to lay on his left side 390 days for the iniquity of the house of Israel, and then on his right side 40 days for iniquity of the house of Judah. And then he's told that each of these days represents a year in history. Well, the chronology helped me understand what those prophecies were about, because I saw how they fell. The 390 years ended with the destruction of the first temple, Solomon's temple. And then the 40 years ended with the destruction of the second temple, 40 years after Jesus rose from the dead. So the chronology helped understand those prophecies.
Now, how do you believe that your faith has either helped you to write the book in the first place, or do you feel that your faith has deepened because you had to do so much research in order to write the book and share it with others?
My faith has grown a lot through study, and as the Bible said, faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. And spending 12,000 hours in the scriptures like I did, I got really close to God, and my faith is really strong, and He's helped me a lot with this book. It's like my friend Marty says. He said, I've read your book, and he said, you had a lot of help with this book because, quite frankly, you're not that good by yourself. And I thought that was kind of funny but it was true what he said, and God helped me so much with it. So yeah, and reading in the Hebrew, and it built my faith. I found a few anomalies in the translations. I could talk some about. I talk about some of those in the book. But overall, the message of the Bible is so intact, and the overall story is exactly the way our English versions tell us. So those few anomalies actually boosted my faith because they led me to discoveries. When I would see small things that look, maybe like they were slightly mistranslated, when you start digging in, you realize the translators their challenges they had in trying to determine how to go with those particular verses, and those led me to some discoveries, and I've included those in the book.
Now, with many authors, they choose to include a dedication. Many include a foreword in their book. Sometimes they even ask for folks to write the foreword for them because there's a special relationship. They could be near and dear to their heart. They could be their mentor, so on and so forth. Did you find that you wanted to do the same? And if so, why was it important to select that particular person?
Well, to start with the dedication of the book is dedicated to my mother and my father and my best friend, all three who are deceased now. And, of course, this book, it's a huge contention that I have the only correct Bible chronology in the history of the world. But I can promise you I would not have put my parents' and my friend's name in the book and dedicated to them if that is not exactly what this book is. As far as the foreword was written by a doctor friend of mine that was my flight instructor in helicopters. And he is also a full-bird Colonel Green Beret, retired, and an airline pilot, retired, who was also an orthopedic surgeon. But I asked him after he read my book if he would consider writing a short foreword to confirm the last chapter of the book, because he was in the last chapter of the book. It talked about how miraculously I met him, and through prayer, I met him and another Green Beret the same day that had to give him a special sign-off to teach in this helicopter, and how God orchestrated the whole thing. And so I wrote it up in the last chapter, and he read it, and he said, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So he wrote a foreword saying, yes, this is exactly what happened. And it was such a miracle that most people that read it thought it was fiction, but it was not. And so I asked him to write the foreword to tell them, no, this is verbatim what happened.
Oh, I love the behind-the-scenes answers to the reasons why authors do what they do, which is just the perfect segue for and my next set of questions for you. So we're just going to try to kind of shift gears just a little bit there. And everyone knows that I ask questions for our aspiring authors out there, that they are some of the top folks who email and let us know that they appreciate the fact that I ask these questions. So again, we're going to kind of shift gears just a little. In that aspect, when you were deciding how you were going to release your work to the public, every author has to decide if they want to self-publish or if they want to use a publishing house. How did you make the determination as to how you would go or which route you would choose to either self-publish or use a publishing house?
Well, this is the only book I've done. So when I did the first one, I found this self-publishing company, and I published it. I guess I didn't even consider trying a publishing house. And then the book was expensive, like I said, because it was a color print. And so as a result, I didn't even push the book, because I knew people wasn't going to buy it. They wouldn't understand the price. I didn't understand the price either. So I said, maybe God doesn't want me to sell this book right now. And then the phone, I just started getting hundreds of calls from publishers wanting me to redo the book. And so then I decided to self-publish. I said, well, they were all saying that you have a bestseller. You just, you have written it in color. You should have made it black and white. It's too expensive for the market. They said, but it's a very good book. So I said, okay, I finally decided to go ahead and redo it. And I knew it was going to take a lot of work, too, because I had to change the format somewhat. And I basically rewrote the book. But it turned out very good.
Now, is there any piece of information, and I'm talking about process information, be it that it's the editing, the choosing of the cover, or selecting the proper publisher, or any of those things, how to do your research or how to format. When it comes to those types of process things, is there anything that you wish you would have known when you were in the middle of it all that you know now that would have made everything a little bit easier? And you've mentioned, about the color aspect of it, but is there any other aspect of the process that, man, you wish you would have known it while you were going through it that you could share with our aspiring authors now?
Yeah, you learn a lot through the process. You learn you want to send it as close to a finished product to the publisher as you can, because you don't get a lot of changes, a lot of chances to make changes. And I didn't know that the first time around. I did this second time, so that helped quite a bit. So I guess that's the main thing. It was tough. Like I said, when you're writing to an audience that you can almost feel that people are going to have preconceived ideas of, hey, nobody's ever done this before. Why would your book be the only correct Bible chronology in the history of the world, and say the one that Sir Isaac Newton promoted and added to back in the 1600s? Why the genius Sir Isaac Newton's is not as accurate as yours? And I knew that was going to be a tough sell because people have preconceptions. But the reason for that is, of course, I had more information. I had the Nabonidus and Sire cylinders that anchored a sure anchor for the chronology that Sir Isaac Newton and Bishop Ussher did not have in the 1500s and 1600s. These artifacts were discovered in the 1800s.
Well, thank you so much for stating your opinion on that, and we will let each and every reader discover for themselves what you have included in the book, and I think that is absolutely awesome. Well, we are out of time, Gerald, but I want to say thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. But before I let you go, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
JohnstonBCD.com, JohnstonBCD.com, one word, and you can get the book at Amazon as well. You can stay in touch with me at the website. Thank you for having me, Dr. Angela. It's been a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you again for being a guest on the show. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you again today. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want you fired up about my guest, Dr. Melva Martin. The name of her book, Wellness a way of life. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Dr. Melva. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Thank you, Dr. Angela. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, ma'am. I'm so glad that you are here. Now, as is tradition here on the show, we always allow our authors to introduce themselves to perhaps those few people out there that may be unfamiliar with you or your work. So first question for you, Dr. Melva, is tell us a little bit about yourself. What makes you, you?
Well, I guess I grew up in the country. I had a very free upbringing in a sense, because we had the country. We were self-sustaining. My parents weren't rich, they were poor, and of course we lived off the land, grew enough potatoes for a year. It was a large family of 7, and my dad butchered our own mutton, and we had vegetables in the garden. So we were very self-sustaining and went to town once or twice a year, mainly to go to the dental clinic, which wasn't very happy occasion. But never mind, I grew up there. And then I had to go to boarding school. And in those days, girls weren't encouraged to be educated. So after boarding school, I went home to work in my mother's milk bar. But I wanted more than that. I learned typing and shorthand at night school, and then I went nursing. My grandmother was a great influence on my life. She was a dedicated Christian and took us to Sunday school when we stayed with her. And so at an early age, we had a pastor come to school who also, and I always remember the scripture from Luke 10, verse 27, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And this scripture stayed with me, and at 17 years of age, I had an accident, which was a turning point in my life, because one person died as a result of that accident. And I went nursing after this, and I got myself a Bible, and I started going to church. And for the rest of my life, I have been a dedicated Christian, a Bible Christian, I would say. I've been to many churches, but it's not the religion that attracts me. It's the Jesus way of life. So, Jesus is my hero.
Uh-huh.
So that, and after nursing, I did midwifery. I went to a missionary training school, and what else have I done? And then I got married and had 4 children, and then I started educating myself with degrees. So by correspondence, I did degrees in nursing and education, religious studies, and at the same time I founded the Naturopathic College of New Zealand. This was a vision that God gave me, found this Naturopathic College of New Zealand. So I ran that for 30 years, and then I also started the Osteopathic College of New Zealand, which ran for 10 years. So again, you know, I've had this calling to nurse, to teach, to become involved in natural therapy.
Absolutely. I love that you have done all of those things. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that this was simply another way, another resource, a way to share your information with the masses?
Well, it started when I was a young mum, and I was giving talks to ladies who also had children, and I was telling them about all the good things we can use in the kitchen cupboard for health and healing. And somebody said to me, oh, you should write a book. So I went home and I thought, oh, that would be a good idea. So the first book I wrote was Health and Healing from the Kitchen, and it was all about the spices and the all the different things, like the things you could use salt for, and pepper and cayenne pepper and thyme and sage, all those things that were handy in the cupboard that you could use for health and healing. So I wrote this little book and self-published it, and that was very popular. And then I rewrote that book many years later. So this is going back a long time now. So and then I always had in my mind that my next book would be something about my spiritual journey or my life, and also encouraging people to follow a simplistic way of living and using all these natural therapies that are so accessible and easy. And I saw the growth of the drug industry, and it's from in New Zealand, I think many years ago it was about $80 million, but now it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars that are spent by the government on drugs. And there's an awful lot of people taking pills they don't need to take, and there's all terms that are so simple, so cheap, and so easy. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book.
Absolutely. Now, the title of your book, Wellness, A Way of Life, why are these the appropriate words to entitle your work?
Well, to me, a way of life is we're spiritual beings clothed in a physical body. So I look at wellness, first of all, as a spiritual being, where your first line of call when you're sick is to go to prayer, go to God. Jesus said, Jesus did so much healing, and he said, you too can do all these things that I do. He healed, and he called on God. He called on the Holy Spirit. There's just so much power that can be unleashed with living a life close to God and just going out into nature, into creation. Well, I think wellness to me is a fact of life. If you keep well, then you're healthy, and it was written for people who are seeking knowledge and wisdom in order to discover that wellness is in fact a way of life.
Oh, I do like that, and you are so correct. Wellness should be our way of life, but unfortunately it is not for so many people. Now, why did you decide that this book needed to be released? There are a lot of books that talk about wellness, and each one, I'm sure, is important in its own right, but why did you feel that it was important for you to share this information that was on your heart?
Well, I was very concerned about the growth in the drug industry, and I have never taken drugs. It's just that this is a better way of life. You've got the natural chemicals in your body, you've got the spiritual aspect, and you can keep well with all the natural products that have been created for us around about growing food and looking at nature and
and looking at nature and making sure that everything is just so. You are so right there. I think that for so many of us, there's a disconnect between from farm to table. We don't understand how our food is grown, where it's grown, and the nutritional value of why we should eat certain things. So you are so right there. It definitely needs to be shared. Now, for many of the authors I talk to, there's a certain thing that motivates them or kind of gave them a nudge, if you will, to make sure that they were not only writing, but they're staying current in the information and sharing any new resources or new discoveries as we continue to grow as a culture. With that being said, did you have any particular thing that really motivated you to either start writing or to make sure that the book was available?
Well, I've lived a very busy life teaching and running the Naturopathic College of New Zealand, but now in my latter years I'm going back to the land, and I believe that if we look after the earth, we don't spray it with pesticides and all those other things that are very costly. We look after the land and grow our own food. We can be healthy and get nice clear water. We can be healthy and well, and this is one way to just be well and have a way of life that is joyful and full of health and wellness.
I like that. Now, what is one thing that you want for your readers to understand having picked up a copy of your book? If they don't remember anything else, what's one thing you want to make sure that they know, that they realize, or that they understand about your book?
Well, in the book, there are many things that show ways of wellness. There's a wellness model, and it shows you that water's the best medicine. There's ways of fasting, food and diet, homeopathic home remedies, bark flower remedies, herbal remedies, aromatherapy, massage, foot therapy, and connecting to the earth, spirit, and sound. All these things are essential for wellness, and they are cheap, easy to obtain, and it gets you away from drugs and the side effects of drugs and all those nasty things that are happening around us today.
You are so right about the pesticides. I remember having a conversation with a few folks, and they were saying how we're finding that in more and more people that though they may be eating a particular food that they thought was healthy for them, because they're allergic actually to one of the pesticides, that they were having some reactions to that particular food. But it's not in fact the food, it's the pesticide. And I don't think that people understand how important like washing your fruits and vegetables are, and those little things that we can do that it sounds like you're making sure people are aware that they need to do, that it's not like optional, but that we really do need to do these particular things.
Exactly. That's exactly what I wanted people to know.
Thank you for that. And I think we really do need to really pay close attention to that. Now, let me ask you this, Dr. Melva. I like giving books to our young people, like our young adults, and even some of our high school graduates. It's just a thing that I do. My mother introduced books to me at a very young age, so I have a love of books, and I try to carry that over to the next generation. With that being said, would you say that your book is appropriate for someone who is high school age, or do you think maybe college age and older is a little bit more appropriate?
Oh, no, absolutely. It's written in very simple language, straightforward, different chapters. One can pick up the book, go from one chapter to another. But no, definitely. And the younger generation are becoming more interested. I have a granddaughter who's become vegan and very interested in nutrition and keeping healthy and well, exercise. No, the young people really are looking at alternatives, looking at saving the planet, and it's just wonderful to see. So, no, it's an appropriate book for all ages.
You are so right there, and I just applaud our young people out there, because they are taking a vested interest, and they're really calling us to task. I feel that if you're going to say that you're about saving the planet, then don't talk about it. Do something to make sure that you help save the planet. So bravo to all of our Gen Zers out there, all of our millennials, and our young folks that are really and truly trying to make a difference in the world. I love it. And of course, you as well, Dr. Melva, because you're reminding everyone of wellness and that it should definitely be a way of life. I love it. I love it. Now, it is time for us to get ready to go to break. But before we do, Dr. Melva, could you please remind everyone what is the title of your book? And of course, where can we pick up a copy?
The title is Wellness, A Way of Life, and it can be obtained from Amazon or where books are sold. So inquire at your local bookstore and they'll get it for you.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Dr. Melva Martin, and we're talking about her book, Wellness, A Way of Life. Now, Dr. Melva, my next question for you is there sometimes there can be hard parts of putting a book together or difficult parts of making it all fit together properly. By chance, was there any part of the book that you found difficult to segue from one topic to the next, or how were you able to make sure that all of the bits and pieces that you provided in the book, that they flowed into each other?
Well, they did really, because I just had I've had it in my head for many years, and then when I went to put it on paper, it just flowed quite naturally. And then the hardest part, I think, was just revising and getting it into a state where it could be published.
I can definitely understand that. Now, we kind of hinted on this next question that I have for you before we went to break, and that is the urgency of being aware of what's going on in the world right now. Do you believe that there's an urgency when it comes to reading your book? And if so, why do you believe that urgency exists?
Oh, absolutely. We've got the COVID-19 pandemic throughout the world, and this is creating a lot of fear. And I think, firstly, if you don't have a spiritual belief, it can create fear. Love overcomes fear. Peace overcomes fear. But also, there are a lot of natural things that can be done, like growing your own food without pesticides and without artificial fertilizers is going to give you good food that will strengthen your immune system. And if you do get sick, there are alternatives, like if I get the flu or cold or anything, first thing I reach for is lemon, ginger, and honey, and make a hot drink, go to bed, sweat it out, and then add a bit of cayenne pepper if you want to. But there's simple ways of overcoming. Now, we grew up in the country, and if we had anything infectious, chickenpox, measles, there was no immunisation in those days. We were just given natural products, salt gargles, and go to bed, lemon drinks, and all these natural products are so useful for any of these sicknesses, and there are alternatives.
And I remember as a little child that you're right about being given natural or homeopathic remedies for the common cold and things like that. That it really and truly was a different way of dealing with things. But I find that more and more people, I think, are trying to turn away from things that aren't as natural or as organic as they could be. People seem to be drawn to that now, that we're going back to the old ways of doing things, that we realize that our grandmothers were a wealth of knowledge, that those tidbits and those cures, if you will, that she shared with us, that they are still true today, that a great herbal remedy is still a great herbal remedy.
Oh, absolutely. I always have thyme and sage in my garden, and my grandmother had thyme and sage. She talked about when she was a child, she was given the job of going around and digging up the dandelion roots, and they'd roast the dandelion roots for their coffee. And there's just so many natural things. If you look around, if you get a bee sting and you're out in the field, or wasp sting, just look around for a dock leaf or a plantain leaf and just squeeze the juice out, rub it on the sting, and within no time at all there'll be no stinging.
See, you have just totally and completely given someone the answer. Like, oh my goodness, is that all I need to do? But instead we rush off to our corner drugstore looking for some type of medicine. I still firmly believe that God has given us the answer all around us if we know what we're looking for. So I love that you're sharing this knowledge with us. I really do. Now, who would you say would benefit most from your book? Would you say it's someone who is just kind of curious about learning about wellness and natural ways of doing things, but is it also good for the person who perhaps they've been doing this all along and they kind of want a refresher class? Is it good for one or the other, or would you say both?
For both. For somebody who's seeking, then it's a good outline of different ways of doing things. And for those who want a refresher, it's a good reference book. You can look up in every chapter, like in the homeopathic remedy chapter, there's a handful of remedies that have served people for years and years and years. Herbal remedies, there's a handful of remedies, what you can use them for and how you can use them. Easy. Good investment.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Now, what advice could you give to those who are looking for a way to introduce perhaps gardening, or they're looking to introduce a new state of wellness to their children? Especially with the pandemic, many people, and depending on where they're listening from in the world, they may still be in a state of maybe not full lockdown, but there's still some restrictions there, and they're using this time to help introduce a healthy living to their children. Would those moms out there be able to utilize your book in some way to help teach their children, their little people, about wellness as well?
Oh, yes. What comes to mind is they could get them growing seeds. You could start growing seeds on a little dish, see them sprouting, and then plant them in a little bit of soil. You could also start sprouting mung beans. The mung beans, or any beans, the mung beans are particularly nice sprouted, and you can eat them. So put them in a little bit of water, drain the water off, rinse them every day, and in about 4 days, they'll have little sprouts, and you can eat these delicious little mung beans. And kids just love to see things grow, and it's just like magic. You put these beans with nothing in water, and then suddenly they get little sprouts and they grow, and then you can eat them, and they're delicious.
What a great idea. I love that. That is so true. And Dr. Melva, I remember when I planted my garden, and I started off very simply because I didn't know exactly the all of what I wanted to plant. So I started off kind of one thing here, and then another thing, and then another thing, and then it grew into a whole lot of things. But I do remember that comment that you made about little kids like to watch stuff. I do remember that my mother had a garden and my grandmother had a garden, and just watching them in that space, and how it was always a happy time in the garden. Now, it wasn't to replace necessarily going to the grocery store, but it was so nice to be able to go and get a fresh tomato, or to get a fresh cucumber or a fresh lettuce out of the garden to make the dinner salad. So you're right. I do remember how my kids enjoyed, like, I can't believe Mom is like growing green beans out here. So you're right. It really is a fun thing to watch. That is a great memory.
Absolutely. And another thing is growing flowers. Sunflower seeds. Start sunflower seeds growing, and then when they flower, you get these beautiful golden sunflowers.
That is very true. I did not think about that. I have a neighbor. Well, she's no longer my neighbor, but she grew sunflowers, and oh my goodness, she easily had about 20 sunflowers that would grow. And Dr. Melva, I tell you, it was so beautiful. Just when you're on your afternoon walk, and I think everyone purposefully walked past her house just so that they could see the sunflowers, and they're so tall, but they're so grand a flower. And you're right, it was really beautiful to see that. And I'll tell you, making memories sometimes is such an easy thing to do when we're doing something that brings us together as a family. So you are so right.
Yes, and another one is lavender, of course. I have a garden with lavender that have bloomed all year, and the scent from lavender, and you can bring the flowers inside to deter the flies in the summertime, and make a little spray, which is an antiseptic spray. It's good to spray on the skin for sunburn or preventing the sunburning, and also for mosquitoes or sandflies.
Oh, wow. I did not realize that about the lavender for mosquitoes. Okay. Now, see, I tell you, the things you learn when you simply talk. I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Melva, I want to ask you a few questions about your process. One of the things that my listeners know that I do is I try to ask successful authors about what they did and didn't do, what was successful and what wasn't successful for aspiring authors out there. So I would like to ask you about the process of choosing how to get your book published. We know that in today's world, we have the option of self-publishing versus using a publishing house. I know when I was a little girl, that self-publishing was not an option, so there weren't as many available authors as there are today. Did you find that which way kind of worked best for you? Did you choose to be a self-published author, or did you choose to go by route of publishing house?
Well, my first book I self-published in a little town in New Zealand, which worked really well. And then my second book I had published by a friend in Bali, which again worked really well because I was right there on the spot and helped with the process. And then the third one I went through, the Balboa and Gold Touch Press, and it was a wee bit different. Yes, it was a wee bit different, and it was more difficult, I would say. But self-publishing is quite a good way to go. You need to pay for it, of course.
And I ask that question because every author's experience is different, as is every person. So, you could even find, I'm sure I could go back and listen to all of the shows and find everyone who was published by the same publisher, and someone would have an experience that was a little bit different than another. So thank you so much for sharing that. So there are some things that you need to be prepared for, even if you self-publish, but in that preparation, you can still have a successful end result. So I love it. I love it. Well, Dr. Melva, we are out of time, but I have so enjoyed spending time with you here today. Before I let you go, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? But I also want to ask, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Wellness, A Way of Life is the book title. It can be obtained from Amazon or where books are sold, local bookstore. So we will always get it for you. And if you want to reach me, my website is www.melva.com. Nice and easy. http://www.melva.com. So I'm quite happy to receive emails and chat to anyone who wants to chat with me.
I love it. Well, thank you again, Dr. Melva, for being a guest here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Angela. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it with me today, and I appreciate your doing that. As always, I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you again today. Well, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.